Hi. Hi, Sharon. Okay, let's see. Waiting room 14. Admittal. Hi, Bridget. Hi, Charlie. Okay. Let me get this view down here. Mhm.
Showing up on there. There, now I am.
Yeah. So give me 1 second because I have to send Shay the Zoom link because she can't find it. So hold on 1 second. I will be right. Oh, they actually found it. Okay, now I gotta find her. Where are you, Shay?
I figured it out. Let me figure out my uh video. Okay.
Oh, okay. Because I'm like, I'm looking for you and I can't find you. Where are you? Okay. Da, da, da. There you are. Okay. Now I'm going to. Okay. Let me see if I can change this to gallery. Nope. Don't like that. This one. There we go. Okay. How's that look? That look good? All right. Awesome. Oh my gosh. So I know this is a little bit different than what we normally do. Normally this is we talk about subjects that affect our everyday life, like communication and boundaries and what's a toxic relationship, what's a good relationship, how to step outside of your comfort zone and all of those things. So, but I had read a post that Shay put up about a podcast called the Telepathy Tapes. And I thought, well, then I saw other people posting and I saw more people posting. So I was like, well, I gotta figure out what this is. And I'm kind of glad that nobody gave a lot of information ahead of time about what it actually was. So, so when I started listening to it, it was mind blowing. And so I decided like I couldn't find anybody to really talk about it with, like I told people about it, but they were at the beginning and I had already listened to it and I wanted to talk to people. So I thought, well, hell, I'll just make my own group and talk about it with them. So this is my favorite group of people. So I thought, well, who would be also a great person to invite to help us get into this? And I had been talking to Kathy Price, and she told me about a conversation that she and Shay had just had, that they had gone down the rabbit hole for hours. And I thought, Shea Stewart's coming on and she's going to help us. She's going to help us open up this rabbit hole and see where we go. So I think that a lot of people here probably know who Shay is, but I'm going to just read her bio to you real quick. I made notes for this today. I don't know if I'll need them, but we're ready to go. So, Shea Stewart is a qualified and certified advanced biodynamic craniosacral practitioner and certified in applied quantum biology through ANMCB. Currently, Shea teaches equine biodynamic craniosacral classes in Fort Worth, Texas, and offers online classes with a private membership for support. Shea also offers in-person consultations and distance healing sessions for humans and horses alike. You can find her at equinebalance.net. Okay. Yes. Hold on. I have to add my co-host. There you are. Okay. Co-host, make co-host. Okay. There you go, Kat. You're in the driver's seat now.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. So I take it you all have at least watched some of the telepathy tapes. And so what I thought is that I would let Shay maybe start with just talking about uh, what stood out to her when she started listening to it, like why it was so impactful for her, and then I'll jump in with some of my stuff, and then we'll all jump in and we'll just start this party. Okay? Sound good?
Mhm.
Okay. All right, Shay. What was it about the telepathy tapes that made you sit up straight and go, wait a minute?
Um, well, first of all, thank you. I'm so excited to be here because
Thank you for coming.
this is a topic I've been studying for a long time, if not my whole life. Um, what stood out to me was that this idea is has gone a little more mainstream, I guess you can say, because the study of telepathy, intuition, remote viewing, that's all the same thing. And it's been studied for a really long time. Like this is something that, the biodynamic craniosacral courses I went through, that form of body work, in a sense, is remote viewing of the traumas held within the fluid body and tapping into the rhythms from nature to help the body feel supported to let that go.
Hmm.
Um, and with that, all kinds of things happen. And I was always a little hesitant to say stuff to people because I thought they're going to think I'm nuts. But, while I worked, but the more I said something like, I just had a vision of, blah, blah, blah. They would go, oh yeah, that's when, this happened. Or, um, so this, in a sense, this has been, it's a part of our biology. It's just suppressed. And this, telepathy tapes was, to me, it was none of it was surprising. It was exciting that to learn that these nonverbal individuals are doing this. And then it totally makes sense to me because when you lose one sense or one ability, other things get stronger. And if you lose your ability to, or don't have that ability to verbally communicate, it happens other ways, the communication. And when I was a kid, it was normal for, when I was a kid, this was in the 70s, so we didn't have cell phones, we had landlines, and most of us had, what was it called? A community landline, where your neighbors,
Oh, the party line.
party line, yeah, we all shared a line. So actually getting a hold of somebody was difficult and on the phone. So like my mother would be like, "Oh, I have to tell, my cousin something." And I'm gonna go, think about her. And she would go like send her mental messages, and then, an hour later she would call, and that was normal. And my mother used to say she could tell who was calling by the tone of the ring of the telephone. And
Let me
and
say something real quick. I don't want to cut you up, but I just realized the other day I was going, who was that woman that was on Work's podcast that was talking about how they didn't really use phones in her family? They would just like ring people up with their mind or they knew. And I was like, it's this really pretty woman with like dark hair. How come I forgot about her? Who was that? And now I'm going, oh my gosh, talk about a dumb moment. Like, anyway,
so I've
sorry.
talked about this before.
But
Um,
but I wanted to listen to it again. And so here you are.
yeah, and it just popped in my mind. Um, and then even I think it was Mark Twain talked about this with, back in his day, people wrote letters, and he came up with a term where um, I can't remember what he called it, letter telepathy or something, where you would write someone a letter, put it in the mail, and by the time they got it, you were receiving a letter from them. So, I mean, he, this kind of stuff, and then how many times do you like probably daily, I'll someone will pop in my mind, I'll grab my phone and text them and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, I was just thinking about you." That kind of stuff. It's all the same. It's and and it's like a muscle. The more we acknowledge it, the more it builds. And that's what happened with me with the craniosacral work, is the more I acknowledged these visions, and because of my training, I understood what it was when I was seeing something that was whatever that was held within the fluids of that body, it was being sorted out.
Hmm.
It was either leaving or just reorganizing. And people are, and I've also learned that people are way more intuitive than we know, because or we give ourselves credit for, because we don't acknowledge it or we don't think about it. And there was a horse I was working on one time, for example, and I had a vision of this horse standing in the middle of a field staring out in the woods. And the horse felt a little empty, like longing kind of feeling. And as I was visualizing this, the owner, the woman next to me was saying, "Oh, I just can't feel this stuff, and I'm not very intuitive." And then she started telling a story about the two pasture mates of this horse had died recently. And she said, and ever since then, she's been standing out in the field, staring out into the woods all by herself. And and I looked at her and I said, "Well, you're more intuitive than you think." And I told her what I was just visualizing. So all all these thoughts that come to us, there's a difference. There's a lot of people who actually teach um, remote viewing or remote healing. Um, and there's a ton of science behind it. And if you ever want to get into the science, a really good person to look up is Dan Winter. He has 20 years of YouTube videos talking about the science behind all of this stuff. And it has to do with charge implosion and plasma vortexes, and it's very quantum physics type stuff. Energy. He has stuff to measure the energy behind it. But there's even in St. Petersburg, there's a school where they teach kids how to see without their eyes. So they blindfold them and they teach them all kinds of things. They play tennis and do all sorts of stuff without seeing. So they become clairvoyant. And then there was a scientist named Konstantin Korotkov who actually measured it and proved um, that this was real. And he called it it was a measurement of the golden ratio cascade of the alpha and gamma waves in the brain um, imploding and moving into this vortex and connecting to the longitudinal field of gravity. Anyway, so there's a lot.
With you. I'm with you all. I totally understand. I was just thinking about this morning.
So I mean, there's a lot of science behind it. And even our own CIA has spent
Yeah.
millions of dollars studying and implementing remote viewing. And before I went to Romania, years ago, I thought there's got to be a lot of mystical aspects of this country. It's too old, it's too much history. So I Googled and I found this article on how they have these earth grids of magnetic lines, and there's like a triangle of them in Romania, and they used to send their soldiers who already had a propensity for psychic abilities. They would send them there to hone in on their skills, and they use it probably to spy on their enemies or, through remote viewing. But there is a lot behind it, and we all have it. We just don't, it's not supported in our society, but it is supported in many other societies. And the more I've learned about quantum biology, it just makes sense to me, because if you look at our bodies as molecularly, we're 99% water. One of my mentors, Dr. Sarah Pugh, she says, without water, we would just be a pile of dust. And there's been so much studies around water from uh, what is his name? Dr. Masuro Emoto,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
Victor Schauberger was another one. And, they find that water has its own consciousness. And this is what we're made of on a quantum level. And um, in a sense, we also have around us what's called a biofield that's like an expansion of our water. It moves in a toroidal shape, and it comes from the charge of our mitochondria. There's a whole science of biofield studies. And then the space between us is full of there's all kinds of names for it. Ether, um, the quantum field. Um, I imagine it like we're living in water, and it's when we're all connected to that. And in a sense, we're like fractal antennas that can receive information. We just have to understand what's the information, or what's the busy mind, the difference between the two.
Yes, we talked about this. Was it you and I, Kathy, that talked about intuition and like trying to parse out like what is the monkey mind just throwing things at you and what is actually hearing, getting a download or whatever you would call it. I do have a question. What is a toroidal shape? Is that what you
Toroidal field.
said?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like
Round?
you've seen those where it's like a tunneling, and then it comes out.
Oh,
And
yeah, almost like a fountain.
yeah, and it's everywhere. The earth has one. We all have one. All life force has this.
I'd never heard that term, so I was like,
Yeah,
that's
you can Google toroidal field, and it'll
toroidal. Okay.
Troidal, I think.
Okay. I'm sure I'll find it. That's fascinating. It really is. And I like that you brought it back to the thoughts too, like which trying to differentiate. How do you differentiate those thoughts?
Well, I can almost feel it in my brain. Like I feel like my busy mind is in front, and my intuitive mind is deep. Um, that's what I feel.
Mhm.
I'm pretty good at shutting down a busy mind. Um, and the intuitive thoughts are almost like in the periphery. It's like a peripheral vision. And um, what was I going to say about that? It comes, the people who study it say that it comes when you're in an alpha brainwave state, and an alpha brainwave state has the same resonant vibration as the Earth's heartbeat, the Schumann resonance of the Earth. So when we go into an alpha state, which is a little bit of a slower brainwave state, we're more connected to um, these these waves where this can come to you. But for me, it's it's learning how to be neutral and listen without, and the whole biodynamic um, training is all about being a neutral listener. So instead of projecting, what I think is wrong or what I want to fix, we learn to sit back and just stay neutral and just receive or listen to what the body's saying. And it's kind of a complete opposite concept of our modern healthcare, where, we have this narrow focus. And so just learning how to be more expansive and just receive, and then trusting that what you're hearing is intuition, or um, trusting, acknowledging what are our thoughts, what we think, and how we walk in the world, and the way our brain, the things we focus on, the things we talk about, that creates our reality. And that's just a measured science behind that. So you do have to be careful what you focus on and what you think about, and keep it from your heart. Like, I don't even scroll on social media anymore because I just can't. I can't even read the negativity of stuff. I just go focus on other things. Um, so I don't know. Does that kind of make sense or
Yes,
help?
but everything you said, because you say so much that I have like all these notes of things that like, so one of the things from the tapes, all right, well, two things. First, I guess, because it's the last thing you said. I don't know about anybody else, but in the telepathy tapes, when they talk about our thoughts creating our environment, like hearing this forever, right? Especially when it comes to you personally, there's a lot of books about how you allow your energy to affect you, how it affects others, how it affects the opportunities that you can create, how it affects the abundance that you bring into your life. But when they talked about how every thought is going into the collective, I was like, oh shit. Because I was like, I work very hard, but especially hard driving in certain places to keep my Zen vibe going. So and then I think about the thing where we talk about anxiety and how anxiety causes cortisol to build in your body, how it's bad for your health, how it's bad. And then you have people who have anxiety about having anxiety. So I think that you bring up one good thing, which is about the idea of, how are you doing your housekeeping? You saying you don't scroll so that then you're not going through the kind of roller coaster of feelings that might get triggered and thoughts that might be created by what you're seeing. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes. And if I have days where I feel out of sorts, nature truly does heal. I have not missed a sunrise in 3 years. Every morning, I'm out there as the sun's rising, and I have a little circadian app that says, okay, sunrise is now, then UVA comes out, then UVB comes out, depending on where you are in the world. And that alone brings magic to our body. It it it's a signaling to our whole every molecule in our body is light sensing. So it relies on the signaling from light, from sunlight to start certain cascades. We also are meant to be grounded 24/7. That's just our biology. From a quantum perspective, we need those electrons from grounding. So if the only light you're getting is artificial light, and every time you walk outside, you have rubber-soled shoes on, your body is not getting what it needs. So we can easily get in these dopamine depleted states or and have a harder time with if especially if we have things like anxiety, which I've dealt with. Um, we don't have the resource to find our way out of it when we're not connected to the natural world that way. And the more connected we get, the more we embrace our relationship with the sun, with the earth, the more intuitive we get because our biology, every cell in our body has hundreds of mitochondria in it. And these are light sensing organelles. And they create water, they create our intercellular water. That's what creates our water, not the water we drink. It's our mitochondria. And the only way it creates that is from sunlight. It also creates light. They make all kinds of things. And the healthier they are, the more optimized we are, the more we can embrace our full selves. And that includes our telepathic self. Sorry, I kind of get babbly and go
No,
off.
are you kidding? No, no, no. No, that was great. And it makes sense too. It made me think like it makes sense um because of the fact that people typically struggle with depression a lot more in the winter when there's less light, less chance of not wearing shoes outside and being barefoot. So that totally makes sense to me. I
Can
did want
I?
to go back to one of the other things that you said because you started talking about how intuition comes in better when you're in an alpha state, right? So it made me remember the part in the telepathy tapes where the what was being shared from the hill, right, was,
Loved that.
oh my God, love that so much. Like, all right, so was that science talks about, the alpha state, the beta state, delta, and that there's more than those, that when we go to sleep, we're not just in delta state the way science understands it, but this is where we have experiences in kind of like the quantum realm or the out of body and the collective unconscious. Do you remember that? What do you think about?
Yeah. Dan Winters talks a lot about oh, well, I just went blank. It's when you control your dream. What's it called?
Oh, the lucid.
Lucid dreaming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lucid dreaming. And the more you can get into that state and control it, the more you're charged, the more you're charged. And it's about implosion. So it's about on quantum level, everything being charged and vortexing. And that lucid dream state is, yeah, it is a very powerful state. I don't know, it's enough about it. It's something I do try to do. Like if I'm, when you're waking up in the morning and you're kind of waking up in a dream, like you might be remembering a dream, I'll try to stay in that and then navigate the dream a little bit. It's hard. I mean, it takes practice. Definitely takes practice. Or when you're going to sleep, or if you wake up in the middle of the night in a dream, you can kind of like stay in that and then just start navigating the dream. So I think that's part of I think that's the same thing of what they're doing and or what they're talking about and when we sleep.
It's
Because
like the
we,
same muscle that they're using that we ours are flabby.
yeah, ours is pretty,
Okay.
yeah, pretty weak.
Yeah, because that like I know I'm so excited about this podcast and talking about it, but I will say at the same time it does freak me out a bit because I already have my hands full with this realm, right? I feel like there's so much, even in the even in the much maybe smaller ways that, when we're talking about intuition and we're talking about manifesting and following the little voice and all of these ways of communication too that are going below the surface level. But this was like a geyser of below the surface level. And so I always thought like the parents are speaking truth when they're like, I was freaked out, like, no, it's not, you know, comforting to know that your child can read your mind because that's just that's a lot to deal with. So, but I am not afraid of it either, and I'm fascinated by it. So, I think that, how when we talk about communication too, because as you guys know, I'm a big fan of communication, of healthy communication, of finding ways to communicate that cause good dialogue, understanding, to take away arguments and bitterness and be able to listen, which is even harder, which I heard you saying, Shay, when you were talking about this idea of like holding space and it was sounded like just a really good way of practicing listening.
Li-
So,
and living from your heart.
yes.
I think when you're in that state, I think what's scary for people, I mean, I can understand how it's scary, but when you're in that and you're in your heart space, I don't think it's about sitting there listening to someone's chatter in their head. I think it's about unconditional love.
I like that. And that makes sense to me. It also makes me wonder about, so one of the things that they talked about, yes, and connection, Kathy, exactly. One of the things they talked about was everybody has the ability to work this muscle, go into this and start developing their own ability to be, let's say, more intuitive, to hear more. And I wonder how much, because there's a lot of talk about the nonverbal communication that happens when we communicate with each other. And there's a lot of talk about that as far as body language and all that. But I always felt like it was more than that, that there was signals that we were getting from the other person, even if even if everything on the surface didn't support what you were feeling, right? Now, it gets into a weird place, right? Because we don't want to be creating stories around a piece of information because it's still going through our lens, right? And that's where things can get tricky because if we take one piece of information, that could mean one thing to me, it could mean something different to Shea, and then we can project a story onto it. But the key to being in this in this example, like with what the telepathy tapes are talking about, is how you become, like you said, kind of like a receptor, and you're not bringing, that's where you were talking about your work. So you're not bringing any of your own thoughts or projections or expectations or wants, but can just sit in that space and be able to take in.
Yes.
And do you think more of that is actually happening in our day-to-day communication than we realize?
Yes. We pick up, I mean, we have so many senses, like every molecule in our bodies, light sensing. Light is vibration. We're picking this stuff up all the time. It's like our water matrix inside of us has its own thing going on without our brain picking up signals all the time. And and we also have the photoreceptors, non-visual photoreceptors. And so we are picking up signals constantly. And we pick up signals, you know, un unconsciously all the time. I mean, you just think about when, if you're going somewhere and you decide to, take a different route and, you know, find out something happened on that other route, things like that. Uh,
Hmm.
or, whatever. I could think of 1,000 different examples of that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, I think that we've all had things like that happen, right? When I had Kathy on, we were talking about intuition and I was talking about and it was just such a banal example. Like it wasn't anything huge, like, oh my God, I didn't get on the plane and the plane crashed or something like that. It was just my grandfather's voice in my head suddenly after I dropped the kids off from school that said to slow down. And I slowed down on this curvy road, and there was a cop around the corner trying to catch. But it was so clear. Like I wasn't thinking like I wasn't, it was like a radio signal got tuned in my head, and the message came right in. And I've always thought about how bizarre that was because it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't about anything monumental that I could see.
And that's how this stuff happens. It's not always, big earth-shattering revelations or whatever. It's the little pieces that happen throughout your day. It's little things. It's subtle things. And the more you acknowledge it, the more you find it. You can even write them down, do a journal, oh, this happened, that happened, and you're building that muscle. You're you're inviting more of it in.
So, how did the telepathy tapes just really reinforce to you what you've been studying?
Um, it was like a validation because, this is weird. I'm even the other day I was like this working on a horse. I was like, this may sound weird, and the the person said it's okay. I've I've hired animal communicators, and so luckily with horses, most people have hired animal communicators, so it's okay for me to say these things. And the more like the telepathy tapes, I guess for me it helped me feel more confident in that realm of life. I love the a recent one where the little girl was visiting, and they she did you listen to that one? They realized it was the neighbor who was an older woman who was in hospice.
Yes, yeah, that was in the talks first. I think that was the after, like there was the telepathy tapes and then there was the telepathy talks, I think, the talk series. Yes.
Yeah, that one was wild.
Hmm.
And I've had experiences, and it's just I just thought it was really cool that this it's kind of coming to light. And I feel like we're in a age where people are beginning to accept it more. And I think it's my own opinion is because it's like we get excited about it because it's a lost sensory perception. And on some level, I think we're seeking that because it's something in us that knows. And so when we hear about things like the telepathy tapes, or we listen to, somebody famous, channeler, or who, whatever, we we get drawn to it because it's like reconnecting with a part of ourselves that's been a little suppressed, or a lot suppressed.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. My friend Kathy has been bouncing in her chair over here.
Oh, hi, Kathy.
Come
Very
in,
good.
Kathy.
Hi, hi, hi. Oh my God. Such a brilliant conversation. I'll keep this brief. I could go on for a long time. Firstly, Shay, what you just said about do you think this is the time? Listening to it, I went in to to it with my skeptical scientific head on. And I'd heard somebody say, oh, some of it's been, there's a psychologist I know who sort of thinks it's not, not real, whatever. So I went looking up the scam bit, and they made two comments about one of the videos, and also in some of the tapes the person is touching the child, the non-verbal. When you get to about chapter 8, they say why, because the child just can't feel their hands, can't feel their feet, and it grounds them. It says you're here, you're here. So that was something there. But when I was listening to it, I thought, my God, they've been studying this since 1980, and yet now 25, no, what are we, 40 years later, it's coming to the fore. And then it got me to thinking about the age of Aquarius, how we had that big shift in the celestial pattern going from the 70s, 80s into the 2000s, when we were in the precession, when the Earth was nearest the center of the universe, and how that's the moment of change, like Greg Braden talks about in his book Fractal Time, how there's a repetition of cycle, and that we are, he believes, the first human population that understands what this is, and that we have a moment of choice. And so as I was listening, I was thinking, is this the moment where massive change can happen? And this is part of it because it's undeniable. And what you said about how, and what they say, it's coming from the heart and it's all about love. And that what these, people are showing time and time again through scientific stuff, it's real, and nobody can take it away, and nobody can package it. It's beyond that. So I just got really excited, I'm afraid, because I thought, well, maybe this is the shift that needs to happen, because I mean everything else is going to shit. So maybe this is the moment that, or one of the precursors or a catalyst where that change can happen. So that was that point. And very briefly, there were two bits in this. Christine, you asked a lovely question about did it, what was the validation for you, Shay, in your work? The two things that came to me that just rocked me backwards. One where they said about all the information is in the field and how they go to the field to find. And that's the way I've always described my work, is that I know nothing, you know everything. I'm helping you find that information which is in the field. And the other bit that is in about chapter 8, God, I've got so confused because I've just been listening non-stop, was when they said about everything we do is information to go in the field. So Christine, when you were saying about your thoughts, and I'm thinking, oh yay, I've added to that a bit then, woohoo boys. But everything is valid. And it's about, Nassim Haramein says that we are the universe informing itself from a relative viewpoint, which is that we are this, if you like, energetic forms in human form, because that's the only way that that information of emotional, um, how we feel emotion, how we act physically, that information can only get into the unified field by something being physical. And so if you go to the point that we're all energetic spirits, whatever word you want to call, and we make a decision to come into a physical form to experience life with all its ups and downs and everything, where we learn, and that learning goes into the field so the next person can pick it up, then this all makes sense. So as I was listening and they were saying these words, it was like, oh my God, I'm not weird. I'm not completely mad. There is something going on here. So yeah, thank you. That's what I wanted to say, because I'm just loving it.
No, I love, Kathy, no one could fault you on your enthusiasm because I'm just like, I love everything that you said. And so here, I want to pose a question to you both. I'm noticing other areas that we have labeled and named different things. And if maybe some of these other areas are just all of the same thing, but we've only like found a little piece and we're like maybe a placebo. Maybe a placebo is part of the same thing because it's tapping into some other power in your belief. What about flow state? There's a book by Stephen Kotler called Stealing Fire, where they talk about flow state. And I think hopefully we've all been in that state. And flow state could be when you're so immersed in your art or gardening or working with your animals or riding your horse that like time and space starts to just merge into this space of you're the only thing that exists in the world almost. And everything is working with you. You're not separated from anything. You feel a part, like you're being used in the way that you were always intended to. And to be in flow state with other people or your horse or a dog or anybody, any living thing, is just this magic cocoon almost. It's so fascinating. And Shea, you brought up about the CIA, and the government researching remote viewing and that kind of thing. And Stephen Kotler talks about the military works in flow state because that's the idea of the Navy SEALs and the groups like that, is that they get broken down so much and then built to get up together that somehow they merge. And I don't even know if the mind is actually what is merging, but there's something merging to where they move as one and they don't have to use words to know what the other is about to do or think. And I'm wondering if that is just another facet of what the telepathy tapes is talking about, which is this whole beautiful world that exists like just under the surface of ours. It's that, yeah, I don't know if anybody here is a big Stephen King fan, but I have read almost all of Stephen King's books, and one of my favorites was the Gunslinger series. And in it, one of the famous lines is there are other worlds than these. And it's talking about having parallel universes happening at this, where we exist in another universe and another universe, and how sometimes the worlds are thin, how we can get information or messages from what's just behind, people call it the veil, whatever you want to say, just behind that. I mean, Jung talked about the collective unconscious, right? That everything that we're exploring and doing, it's all existing in that. They're talking about how, ancestral trauma, which is this idea of, you're born with knowing things that you couldn't know because you lived there, but the experiences are in your body. In the same way that a bird is born and knows to fly south without necessarily any other bird showing them. Even if they were separated and raised by hand, they would know some things because that knowledge is passed down. And we take that for granted in animals. Oh, yeah. But that's crazy when you think about the way we're also taught learning works and the brain works. Like they don't, just like placebos, all these things that are right in front of us that exist in plain sight that no one has the answer for. But if you start talking about something too deep, it's like, oh, that's crazy talk. So yes, Kathy, I hope we are at that point in time where we're not going to be burning witches at the stake, and we're not going to be burning the books, and we're going to start really having these conversations and really exploring what is this human experience and how big this universe is and how much there's so much more that we don't know than we do, and to have some humility in science in that. But I think also understanding human beings and understanding and having empathy and compassion for people who dedicated their lives to an academic study and an understanding, and how it must feel that when new information comes to light that might make everything that their life's work was meaningless in the eyes of others, how that must feel, and how we can understand how some people may want to defend that and get angry and defensive, but that's okay. We had to learn things the way we learned them to get here. There's no wrong information. It's like there's no wrong choices that we make. We just find out we might go down a road and go, oh, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't what I thought this was going to be. And now we can scratch that off the list and go, well, that wasn't it. I'm going to go try going down this road. And I think that the compassion piece is an important part in this too, because what we don't want is what Shea was referring to when she's talking about scrolling, is to become part of the people screaming on one side and screaming on the other and pointing fingers. We don't need to do that. Just help usher in these beautiful, amazing revelations and allow them to percolate and allow people to, like, I think that naturally the momentum will build.
I'd just say one thing there about the last bit where you said about um, not trying to convince anyone. And that's something I try and always say. My experience is my truth, but I'm not here to convince you of anything. And so that just says, I'll tell you it, but leave it behind if it doesn't fit.
Yeah. And that's the part, but that's kind of, that's a maturity, right? That's when we start to know ourselves, and when we start to understand it. I also love the idea of just understanding that science isn't right or wrong. Everything in science, even though it gets defended and but everything in science is a theory, because the idea is this based on what we know now, based on our scientific experiments now. This is what we believe. Am I right about that, Kathy? Shea?
I was shutting up there. Yeah. You know, it's mentioned, Rupert Sheldrake mentions, you know, the materialistic science where everything has to be proven. And I come from that place of measure it, replicate it, explain it, fantastic, other words, two words, and the second one's off, because it can't be true. And so this is where science has to be open. You know, for me, a good scientist is someone who, yes, is looking for the quantitative um, measurements and to prove a hypothesis, but everything is about theory and hypothesis. And unless you put a new hypothesis out there, we never move, because it's all going to back to the same thing. And to the extent that Sheldrake talks about the constants, gravitational constant, speed of light, they change. And when he challenged people about this, they went, oh, no, 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 well, no, what actually happened was, yeah, and we averaged it all out and we put it back to one thing. So they knew it had changed. All the measurements around the world show it had changed, but they just went, oh, no, we just averaged it out and put it back to a constant, because it's a constant. That's in the name. So it's all dogma. It's all belief. It's like, you know, primacy of genetics is a dogma rather than this is the actual truth. So yeah, I just think I love science. I love wanting to know how things work, but you've got to be open.
I think also you have to think of what is science. We don't do science like people like Victor Schauberger did. And double blind reductionism is not the only form of, scientific. Because even, I mean, hopefully this changes, and we can go back to other ways of looking at things other than, Victor Schauberger used to just sit in nature and observe the flow of the vortices in the water and how it shaped the nature around it.
Mm-hmm.
And even the early cranial osteopaths, they they did science differently than you know, what our centralized view recognizes in this day and age. But there's more than just that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had talked to Shea briefly before we jumped on, and I said it's funny because when I was doing a little bit of research before this talk, um, one of the things that came up right away was the controversial telepathy tapes and the controversy surrounding the telepathy tapes. And so I wanted to see what are they saying? What is the controversy? Because if you can't look, if you refuse to look, then you kind of prove that you like something because it makes you feel good, but not that you're willing to look at all aspects of it and make an informed decision. So I looked, and from what I could understand, there were two things that they were talking about. One, which was, let's say when a mother is getting a message from her child, the way that the mother interprets it, right? Like, how do you know that that's actually happening? Now, obviously, we all know what they did, and they did the experiments in ways to prove that. So that one didn't really hold a lot of weight to me, because even if some of them you could say, well, this one here or that one there, but the majority of them were done in a way so that that was addressed. The other was the idea of holding someone's wrist up because they don't have that ability so that they can type. That facilitation was what was affecting what was typed. And I thought, oh my God, if someone said, hey, watch this, I can hold someone's wrist and affect what they type, that would be a whole documentary about how do you do that? Where's the messages going? What are you doing? Morse code? Like, And how'd you do it so fast? Because they're doing it so fast. It makes no sense. So I welcome the conversation. I welcome more funding for research. I welcome more ways to understand and address. But, bring something that is a real concern or a real criticism, and then we can talk about that, because it just didn't make sense. And even if you said, okay, touching someone's wrist means that you're downloading entire words into them. At the same time, if we take even that out, there's still a ton in there that didn't involve someone holding someone's wrist. So, and I feel so for, Nancy made a comment about, her concern of all the autistic kids, and if I understand her comment correctly, that, we kind of need to hurry because there's all these autistic kids that really need this. And I agree. While that's true, forcing things has never worked, because it creates the energy of force, which is like a boomerang. And then you can rush in, and then it can actually hurt what you're trying to create. So that's why I love that this is almost like a grassroots moment and movement with this, of people saying we need more of this, and people understanding where to go and that this exists, because I didn't know about this. And the idea that when they start talking about how long some of these scientific experiments have been done, and the level at which they're done, and the level of the institutions that they're happening at, and the Nobel Prize winning scientists that have been doing it, but like everything else is okay except this. It's it's coming. It's coming, because you know why? Because we're all here right now talking about it. So if we got at one point 35 people to take time out of their day to come and talk about talking about a talk that was recorded that we listened to, then clearly there's a thirst for this, and we're excited.
Amen to that. And if we can support the children of the world who, babies and young kids live more in these brainwave states. And that's where it needs to be supported. I mean, I don't see this being taught in our schools anytime soon. But if it's, comes from just people getting together and embracing this aspect of ourselves and embracing that in the children. And because, I think back when I was a child and the things that, the animal, the communication with the horse and the animals and the dogs, and my mother would listen to me. My dad would think he thought it was kind of silly, but if we, or even the trees, or um, everything around us is, we're just connected to it all. And the more we embrace it, the more it'll build in our world, and and helping children not feel bad for these things is important, I think.
Yes. I'm going to just put it out there based on you talking about kids. Um, Maybe there's somebody here that has a story about their daughter, and they have the initials BP. And so maybe they could think about, let me know if they would want to share that story. Yeah, were you thinking about that story just now, Bridget? Okay, so Bridget, can you tell the story about what happened with you and your daughter when she was little?
Yeah, actually, it was funny because I was going to ask about it. When my daughter was around 4 years old, and she had done many, many things up until this. This is just the biggest thing that had an impact. we were driving in the car, and she would always talk to me about God or different things that we had never gone to church. We didn't pray. God was not part of it, but this was how she would present these things that she had happened to her. And she would usually do it when she was at my back. So I'd be driving in the car or washing the dishes, seemed to be the most time that she would bring these things to me. And I was open to it because I'd always felt very telepathy as a child. Looking back on it now, I think was happening quite often for me. But she says to me very calmly, very, as if she's saying the sky is blue, "Oh, mommy, daddy's getting ready to go back to heaven." And I was taken back, and I said, "No, no, 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 baby, we don't say that." And I can still see her little cherub face in that rearview mirror of my car, just completely shocked. Like, why do we not say that? And I said, "No, no, we don't say that. We want daddy to stay here with us. We don't say that." And she says, "Okay, but he is." And a week later, he had a motorcycle accident, and 3 weeks later, he died. And I remember at the time being someone who felt very telepathic and being able to speak to the other side and having these things happen, almost feeling like a conversation had happened, a deal or a contract had happened that I wasn't privy to between her and him and God or whoever or whatever source is, divinity is, and being quite shocked that I hadn't picked up on these things that maybe had happened among them at the time. Um, and it made me think about um, when I think it was Akil said how he could talk to his mom, but not to his dad. And I was wondering what you guys are thinking about the different frequencies, about it's interesting that they can go to the hill and have a conversation with so many, but when it's among us speakers, it's very specific on who those conversations are with. Um, and also, I had been thinking about John Paul and how he talked about when there's anger or hatred, he his frequency, his own frequencies get scrambled, and he doesn't want to participate in anything like that. And I'm feeling that way too. I know that there's a lot of people that are really scared and have a lot of stuff going on in the world, but I have found myself kind of pulling back because I get scrambled when that space is brought to the forefront so much. And so I don't want to become a hermit again on my mountain, but I can feel that I'm so much more comfortable when I'm just here with the trees who are happy or neutral than when I'm out in the world and there's a lot of fear and a lot of scarcity and lack and anger going on. So I just wondered if you guys could talk about both those points. Thank
Shay?
you.
I was thinking about in um, the kid, something you said. Thank you for sharing that story too. That was pretty amazing. I was the kids in St. Petersburg where they teach them to see without their eyes. The thing that they do is they tell them to imagine being in the most beautiful place in nature. And that's what puts them into that fractal space, that fractal antenna space. Um, I personally don't feel like the world is chaotic and negative and um because I go out on my appointments and people are happy and I spend a lot of time by myself too. So I can be, when I was a kid, the two things I wanted to be was either a hermit or a horse trainer. I actually
It was
knew
like
her.
Grizzly Adams. Remember the show Grizzly Adams? Anybody?
Yeah, I remember that.
I wanted to be a vagabond. I thought I was going to actually tie a handkerchief on a stick and get on a train. And I could just go anywhere I wanted.
People do that, you know. You can find them on YouTube.
Or BJ and the Bear. I would drive a truck with a chimp, and we would just travel across the country. Oh yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just the perspective we live in. And you know, I'll talk to a friend who on the phone who's is in that stress state and feels like the world's falling apart, and then every encounter she has when she goes out with people is negative. And I just don't live in that. I don't see it. I don't see it in the world. You know, there's such a bigger picture than if expand out and not narrow focus in on things. Um, and it doesn't seem to be like it seems to be a pretty peaceful existence. I mean, there's stresses here and there, but um, I don't know. I think that's a cool story though, but I mean, not about your, the
Oh,
death, but
It's okay. I'm not offended. It was in May, it'll be 30 years. So it's,
oh,
but actually he's been giving me some really great, incredible downloads around grief and death
mm.
uh lately. So it's been really fascinating time for that to be happening too. So
that's cool. I feel like our deceased or our family members who've are not in physical form, I guess you could say. I feel they're with us. I get messages. I mean, when my mother, I think I told the story when she died, I felt it. And I didn't know what happened, but I felt something big shift in my world. I had no idea what it was. And and I was always really curious about that. Like, what was that? You know, how did I feel that when I was 11? How did I sense that? So that part of like what you were saying earlier, Christine, about, what is life? It's something that's always interested me. And I feel like, and I know she visited me shortly thereafter. Um, I don't know if I've told this story because of when I did when I was little, you know, it got um, dismissed. And shortly after she died, I was in my room and I saw this bright light in the corner of my room, and I heard my mother's voice, and it was like this swirling light, and she said, "I'm okay." And she said, "Don't worry about me. I'm okay. And I'm here. I'll always be here. I'm here with you, and I'm okay." And I remember it like it was yesterday. And then shortly thereafter, when I told a few people, they just thought, "Oh, you just wanted to see that." But it wasn't, and I wasn't sitting there thinking, I think I was coming out of a sleep type situation. But I mean, I've gotten, I don't even know if I should talk about this.
Oh, good. Please do.
Okay. I've gotten messages from other people who've passed on. And recently my sister's partner died. And the night that she died, after she died, I was, I was like, I need to get on the plane and go be with my sister. And I was laying in bed and I got a vision of my sister's partner jumping and like going like this. and saying, Shay, Shay, I know you can hear me. And I was like, and I just went with it. I thought, okay. And she said, tell Deborah, I'm so sorry I couldn't come back. She went in for a knee replacement surgery and they put her under anesthesia and she just never came back. She said, I tried, I couldn't come back. And she said, tell her I'm sorry. And she said, tell her there's a key in the back drawer in my desk and have her find that key because it goes to my jewelry box. And and so I told my sister, and the first thing she did was run, and sure enough, there was a key, and it went to her this jewelry box. And then, like maybe a few months ago, I was meditating, and there she came again, and she said, tell Deborah, because I guess my sister can't hear it. She said, tell Deborah something's going on upstairs. She lives in a condo and she had an upstairs neighbor. Something's going on upstairs, but I'm protecting her.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, well, I'll just send the message to my sister. And then my sister called me and said, well, you're not going to believe this. And the nut like a day later, the some friends of the woman upstairs came knocking on my sister's door and said, "Have you seen?" I don't remember her name. We haven't seen her. I'm worried about her. And my sister said, "We'll do a wellness check." So they called, and she was, unconscious on the floor and been there a week.
Oh my gosh.
And I mean, you can't make that stuff up.
That's amazing. I want to do those things. I want to have that. Somebody come talk to me. I want to tell somebody about the key in the back of the drawer. I want that. I mean, I had some similar things. Nothing as impactful as that, but they were either things that I have no memory of, like when my grandfather finally passed in the hospital, all his kids were sleeping on sleeping bags in the basement, and my cousin said that in the middle of the night I sat up and I said, he's gone. And then I just went back to sleep. So I have no memory of that. Um, and then, but people who I dearly love that have passed, I do get visits, but they're always in my dreams. And they're like dreams like no, they're not like a normal dream at all. I mean, they're like the lucid dreams. And I'm crying and I'm so happy to see them. And so but there's never been a key, Shay. There's never been something, some piece of information that I can take back to the world and go, I have the winning lottery numbers. I'm just going to play them. I'm just going to do it.
Well, those dreams are real, and I know they are because my sister and I have had the exact same dream about our mother on the exact same night of us all three driving in a car together or something. So I know they're real.
Oh, I know they're real. Like you just know. I had, a close friend, a dear friend of mine passed away suddenly and tragically. And I was a mess for a while. And I remember just wanting so bad to have one of the dreams. I wanted to know that she was okay. It took 8 months, but 8 months later, I had that dream. And I just remember when I woke up just laying in bed, like just trying to hold the feeling of it and pull every little piece of it out. But yeah, well, our friend Terry has something she wants to add, and it's so funny because Terry put her hand up, but before Terry put her hand up, I was like, I'm going to put Terry on blast because I know Terry's been adding stuff in the chat, and I know she has great things to share. And then she put her hand up, and then we talked so long, she put her hand down. But um, come on up.
I was just going to say, I talk to dead people.
I see dead people.
I had my brother's good friend used to come through all the time, and I asked him at one point, you know, why are you here with me? Why don't you go and visit with John? And he explained that grief was an energetic block that prevented people from being able to receive, and it was also an important element of kind of like a spiritual contract of if the memory of the person or the visitation of a person would cause grief, that they wouldn't do it. So so it just, the whole thing of this, the telepathy tapes, it I'm so excited about it, and the fact that we have maybe this whole generation of spiritual savants among us, that the horses have been, you know, leading us to this awakening of our intuition, and now we have science that's able to come on board because it's involving humans, and it's involving you know, uh, I don't know, just the non-animal realm, the non, you know, non-nature and everything, that now we're being able to tie into science through our humanity. But it's all going back to a connection of being more than human. And we're talking about being able to receive, and the whole conversation that's going on with these telepathy tapes is that the body is so dense and our emotions are so low frequency that these children can't even access their bodies because they're such a high light frequency. And so the thought of us having teachers on the planet, you know, because we were so concerned that all the shamans were gone, you know, that we had missed that age of learning from the knowledge that was accessible on the planet. And now we have a whole new generation of possibility of teachers for teaching these higher brain frequencies and higher light frequencies. So that was just, you know, as it shifted to talking to TED people, is that yes, we can all do that, and it's just a higher frequency, that as we do all this research of self work, of clearing the body's lower frequencies and choosing higher frequencies, that net you can just access more and more and more out of the body. That was it.
No, just a little light conversation. I got it. No, I said today, I said this conversation can and will go anywhere. So just buckle in. I did want to say, so I know that Elaine is off camera right now, but if she can hear me, she had mentioned that she had a story too, and I'm not sure if she wanted to share it or not. But if you'd like to share your story, Elaine, I would love to hear it.
Okay. Can you see me now?
Yeah.
And shut up for a moment. Oh, so many of these things have resonated with me. It's a very long story, and I don't want to be all long-winded about it, but the negativity in the world never really bothered me, you know, when I was young. I was so focused on attaining my goals. And now, currently, for the last couple of years, I kind of got the carpet pulled out from underneath me personally. And then professionally, I am a nurse, um, recently retired, because of an illness that struck me and shocked everyone that knew me, um, in even myself, which was like acute depression and anxiety. And I never considered myself an anxious person, and neither did anyone else that knew me. Um, but as those two feelings, the one on the professional level was just how the changes in healthcare, corporate healthcare has been slowly changing. Um, and I loved, 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 loved my job. It was like an innate purpose that I needed to achieve. I knew at a very young age, and I felt it. I don't know that it was a choice. It was just, and it wasn't just about being a nurse. I was fascinated and so struck by the biology of creating life, pregnancy, babies. And I felt like I communicated with that on a nonverbal level. And I'm so grateful that I had all of those years. But what has helped me recover was, equine therapy. I always loved horses. I had, exposure to them. An uncle of mine had a ranch upstate New York, but it was just occasional visits and things like that. But and it was kind of like a little girl's dream to like, oh, have my own horse. But I live on Long Island, and it's just, it's not part of my life. But when this illness happened, that I didn't understand because I was just having physical symptoms. I didn't appear anxious. I didn't feel anxious. I didn't know what was going on with me. But that brain body connection, it's like my body just took over and didn't tell me. And I've been unraveling the mystery of this illness. Um, and thank God I am seeing better days. And I feel like the horses and the non-communication, the feeling, is what has helped to let me let go. The only thing that made me feel better was being in the barn.
Mhm.
Um, and that intuitive kind of sense, I feel like I'm connecting, listening to all of this, like that is a part of me, that is a part of my reality that maybe I never understood. It was just, um, it's very hard for me to put it into words, but, um, I'm sorry, my phone is blowing up on me here too. Um, that intuition, that energy, that intangible thing that makes us who we are, that little internal voice, or that someone said, living through the heart. I mean, my depression brought me to wanting to end my life. And I tried. Um, and I didn't want to be here, and I was still here because I believe in that spiritual, intuitive sense that there's more to me than just this body here and now. So, like, it didn't scare me. And a lot of people don't understand that. But I said the only way that I am going to live my life is letting my heart lead. And I feel like I'm hearing things in this conversation that really, really speak to that. And nature and being grounded, like, just to what's out there, that is also nonverbal, energetic, um, has really brought me back to life. So this conversation is blowing my mind. And I'm very, very happy to be here listening. So thank you for the time.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It made me think of something. It made me see it through the context of the conversation we're having. It took me back to when I worked at a drug and alcohol rehabilitation facility. You do a bioassessment on people when they come in, and you ask a lot of questions about how they've been, how maybe
What happened?
they've been eating well, if they, you ask all these questions, and one of the questions they ask is about anxiety. And so people will say, I don't have anxiety. And then they'll ask other quantifying questions. And they will literally check all the boxes at the highest rate of what anxiety, how the way anxiety actually shows up, tension in the body, holding the muscles tight, the fear. And then they'll get told, like, this, what you're describing is actually anxiety. And they're surprised. And I think that one of the messages that we get, or not one, a lot of the messages we get as young children, is we come into the world and our antennas are up. And, we just came from whatever source we came from, and there's a grounded connection to ourselves that we have. And then that gets manipulated to different degrees by our environment. And a lot of people talk about growing up in homes where emotions were something that were shameful. You don't show, like, if you're going to cry, go to your room. If you're going to cry, nobody wants to see that, right? You can't be angry. You can't, there's all of this stuffing down, and we've got to put this armor on. We got to put things in compartments and stuff them away. And then over time, we're not connected to them anymore either. So when we're not connected to it, things can build up unbeknownst to us, where we're like, oh, why all of a sudden I was never a depressed person. I was never an anxious person. Well, I use the analogy. What's true is that there were coping skills that you learned. That brilliant adaptive child that you were learned ways to cope. But there's a certain point of beautiful, what was Brene Brown says, my therapist called it the breakthrough, I called it the breakdown. But we all get to a point in life, and I found that it was mostly in their between like mid 40s to mid 60s, where all the ways, these coping mechanisms that we had created, they just start breaking down and they just stop working. And we have to go through this transformation. And the transformation is almost always wildly uncomfortable. And it's kind of like when they talk about enlightenment, the old you has to die, right? There's a version of you that wasn't the real you, but it's the familiar you. And you don't know who you are without that old you, but you also know that you can't do that anymore. But it's scary to humans, the unknown. It's scary to all of us. That's wired into our subconscious. The unknown is the scariest thing in the world. So we have to be willing to feel like shit and know that it's not going to last forever and that there's information in that. And if we can just put in front of the other and continue and learn and listen, we will eventually get to the place where it starts to make sense. And it's like, I think Terry Keebler talked about that kind of being in that chrysalis stage of the cocoon, and now all that muck starts to turn into something.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Uh, and I will say, and I have said out loud, and no one likes to hear it either, but I do feel like the largest part of me did die in that. And, I call myself like, this is the new Elaine. And I finally have gotten to a stage of, I'm living in this now, not all of that. But there's difficulties that come with that because, the rest of life has to fit in somewhere. But amazingly, this transformation happened at this stage of my life, and I'm very open about what's happened, and I hope it hasn't upset anyone, because I was so blown away at my experience that this happened to me. How could that happen to me? I'm Zen Elaine, like um that I really now I'm dedicating my focus to helping others realize that these things happen to anyone
Or
because
for
it happened to me, and I'm really kind of advocating for mental health, and I want to make it more of an everyday sense, like, because people are so afraid. Fear is like such a tremendous enemy. Um, but with all this quantum stuff, and I have been studying polarity, and the horses bring all of this energy. It's so comforting to know that everyone here has a little dabble of each of those things in their life, you know. So
yes, yes,
like, and I was brought up in a completely different culture, the Catholic Church, organized religion, yes, pushing down all those emotions, and you do what you're told, and you're either good or you're bad, nothing in between. um so just kind of living through the heart, and it's okay.
Well, I think I
So
can say that we all felt that you were sharing through your heart, and that vulnerability and reaching out for connection through it is so brave, but we also love it so much because it takes away all the how what do they call it, like, what's the word I'm looking for, where when you're just talking superficial stuff, I hate small talk, it takes away all the stuff. We get right into the meat, right?
that's me, and I have trouble connecting. I have trouble with interpersonal relationships because of that. Because like I need the meat. That's all I want to know. Like, don't ask me, hi, how are you today? Because you don't want to know how I'm really feeling. I don't think
I
so.
call you Wendy because you're going to be, where's the beef?
um,
Well, we have about 15 minutes left.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to ask if anybody has any questions, or, and thank you very much, Elaine. That was, yeah, I feel you on so many levels. But if anyone has any questions about the telepathy tapes, or something that really stood out to them, or something, their own little story of how something similar to telepathy has happened to them, now's your time. Now's your chance to raise your hand and have your voice heard. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back over to Shea and put her on the spot. Okay. Well, I do have one question that I had written, or one thing I had written down, that just because I thought it was really cool. So, disclaimer, I've always loved rocks, right? Since I was little. I loved finding cool rocks. And then like when crystals came on the scene, I loved them. But then the amount of what would you call, like, crystal worship that kind of felt like it grew up out of that kind of tripped me out. I was, you know, not consulting my crystal before or having to wear my crystal so that I'm safe in the world. There was a lot that tripped me out. So I think, you know, I am a skeptic at heart. I'm um I'm not cynical, right? Because cynical, you're shut down, you're shut off. You already know everything's stupid, but a skeptic says, I'm interested, I'm fascinated, but I want to believe it, but I need to see where's the proof in it. So I kind of slowly got back into the crystal thing, and like, okay, so this makes sense. I don't believe all the little things that they say this rock does all these exact things, because I don't know who is dictating that, who is going out in the world and holding this rock, and now they have love. I don't know, but I do believe that there is energy in the stones. I do believe that there's energy in crystals. And then when they started talking about Houston had all these rocks and crystals, and he started talking about the energy of stones and how some crystals and stones have good energy. And then you find out that they all have a hertz of frequency that they're putting out. So now that skeptic part of me starts going, okay, now I'm starting to catch on to why that crystals and things are so attractive, and what the lure is. So Shay, do you have anything that you want to add to that? Or I don't know, you don't have to, but I just found that really fascinating because it made sense.
Yeah, that crystals are so if you break down a crystal microscopically, it's water with geometric patterning. It's coherent and it holds the coherence of, whatever each different one holds. And a geometric pattern, it's that it goes back to that charge implosion. They have energy in them. And if you think about like a water molecule, it's oxygen and two hydrogens, and it always forms a triangle. And there's a ratio of degrees it's within, and when it hits a certain ratio, I think it's 108 degrees. I don't know, I don't have my notes here. It forms the perfect golden ratio. So you've probably heard of the golden ratio, which is the perfect measurement of things. Um, so a geometric pattern has that, and these crystals have that in them. So they do have specific energy for specific things. When I was, I mean, I have a little plate full of them, but I have when I was in my 20s, I had a friend who grew up in a reservation in Mexico, and his mother was a shaman, and he taught me a lot of things like how little exercises you can do to um, enhance your intuition. And simple things like, get a deck of cards out and pull one out and hold it in your hand and try to visualize what it is. Or if you have a friend that you can play with, you can, say, okay, what color am I guessing? Things like that. And anyway, he gave me this crystal that his mother gave him to give me. And I mean, we were just friends. It was, and I still have it. And it's just a quartz crystal. But yeah, I have a crystal that's called a Vogel crystal, and those are specifically cut with sides on them that enhance frequency, so you can use it it's really interesting. You can use it as a wand. And there's actually a scientist who has a PhD from Princeton, I believe, and metabolic studies, and works at a prestigious metabolic lab in New Jersey, somewhere up there, the Rabinovitz lab. Anyway, she is into quantum biology, and she got funding because there's a lot of private funding for scientists. It's not just government funding. The government, like the thing about the government and NASA is studying plasma, and they're also studying melanin in our skin because that has magic properties. And once NASA or CIA or government takes a study, they kind of control it. So there's no funding for, normal scientists to study it. It becomes like the secret, government studies. Um, anyway, this woman, her name's Dr. Alexis Cohen, and she got private funding to um, start a light lab where they're going to to study the different frequencies of the sun, and you know all these things that is missing in our science. And one of the first studies they're doing is on crystal healing and how that works, because in the quantum biology world, it's very real, these frequencies, and our bodies do respond to it. Um,
have one thing that I wanted to add, and then maybe a question too. So I just said before that, like, who came up with all the little things for each stone means this, and this stone means that, and this stone gives this protection. If anybody does know where those attributes came from, feel free to share because I am curious. But what I do think is that stones being receptors, that if someone tells me that I'm surrounded by crystals, by the way, just so you know. So if someone tells me that even this little one here, right, or like this big sphere that I got that's like ruby, which I love. I have so many. So, but if someone handed this to me and said, this is for people who are grieving and it helps your heart heal. I think that having something tangible, that my intention in holding that crystal with that intention somehow can open up something in me through that, because I'm holding that thing that I was told that this helps with. Does that make sense? Like, so now I'm imbibing it and me almost not quite like a placebo, but do you know what I mean by that? Like if somebody gives you a rose quartz because, you know, you need more love, or there's a feeling that comes with it. It's like charged with the feeling of the intention. That's what I'm trying to say. So I think that in that way alone, that's kind of a beautiful thing.
I think so. I think what the crystal does is it enhances that.
Okay.
And you can go on the Vogel crystal. Um, the guy has a ton of information on crystals, and he's got YouTube videos on how to use the Vogel crystal. I got one just to play with, and it really does. It gets sticky, and you can feel it sparkly, like it's
Like,
yeah, it feels electric.
do you have it there? Can we see it? Can we see it?
Yeah. I also have a rock from that I got in Romania from the Sarmigiu-Ghețea region. I can never say that word. That also has it. Um, can you see it?
Wow.
Yeah, so you charge it by turning it clockwise. It starts to get sticky, and then you can zero in on something or expand out with your intention, and it really intensifies the intention, your intention behind it.
Almost
But
like
this one is 12 sided, so see how it's cut. They're cut very precise in order to direct that. And you have to be like a certified Vogel crystal cutter.
I've never heard of this, so I'm probably going to go on a deep dive after this conversation on
Well,
Vogel.
they have some now. I just saw they're not cheap, but they have some that you can put that has the point, and then this side has a little divot, and you can stick a tuning fork on that divot and hold it and do the tuning fork, and um, then send the frequency that way.
That's so cool. Have you
Yeah.
done it?
I've played with this. Like my dog was limping, and so I did my crystal, and she stopped limping.
Really?
Yeah. I've played with it some.
I think that's because it helped channel some Shea Stewart into your dog. That's what that's what healed her. Um, you know what's trippy to me is that Kai Dickens, who did the telepathy tapes, lives in the next town over from me. So I'm always wondering if I'll run into her at Costco or something, like. But does anybody know when the next season is supposed to come out? Have they even announced that? No, I'm not sure because obviously, obviously I'm excited for that. Um, but I feel like I said, like this the coolest thing about it is that the conversation has started and all of this stuff that I'm finding out has been being researched and studied for decades by some of the top minds in the world, yet nobody talks about it. So I'm happy that people are talking about it, and I'm fine if people think that only crazy people talk about it because I'll be with the crazies. So
Can this crazy person speak? Just to say, you're talking about practicing, trying to guess things. There is an actual website which I've been part of for many years, which it's called Psi Arcade. It's Ions run it. Hang on, I'm going to put it in the chat. And you
please,
can log in there, create an account, and then you can do any number of tests. You can check, try and say which card is coming up next, what order they're coming in, remote viewing, where a thing is on a picture. So if you want to practice your size stuff, that's a really good place to go.
thank you. Thank you. That's awesome. All right. Oh, Sharon, you're back. I was just showing everybody one of my rubies. So Sharon made this. Sharon made this. I'm just gonna take a second to like give a shout out to Sharon because she made that one. She made this one. Look at the, I don't know if you can see it's almost like art. This
Wow.
this sphere. This is like my one that I say is like a Picasso. If you can see the different like shapes and things, they're amazing. She's an amazing human being, and she gave me with this one, wait. I have two more I have to show you. So this one I love, which is it's like a blue and there's like I don't know what that thing is. I think we thought it was like a shoe or something, but there's a big there. And then this one has little tiny, I think she said it was a type of lace they call it, but it looks like little tiny fossils in it. So I don't know if you can see the detail in that one. But yeah, so like I said, surrounded. I'm surrounded. I love them.
You know, another place you can go for information about fun things is the Vesica Institute. Maybe I'll put that in the chat.
Yeah.
That's where I bought a neutral pendulum, which is different from a regular pendulum because it's neutral. And then you find the vibration of whatever it is you're working with. And he has all kinds of cool videos and let me pull it up online and copy it that way because I'll mess it up if I type it. I think so. There's all kinds of institute. There's all kinds of information out there. I think it's just a matter of finding it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't even think about this stuff. It's funny, as I get older, I don't remember my dreams as much as I did when I was younger. I feel like I'm always like grasping to try and remember because I'll feel like the feeling of the dream when I just came out of it. And I bring this up because of the idea of practicing the lucid dreaming. So, yeah, I definitely might do that, but it's
If
been.
you, I found that too, that I wasn't dreaming. And one of the things that causes that is too much artificial light at night and too much non-native EMFs
Okay.
and not enough natural sun light.
guilty. So I should, yeah, I feel the difference when I don't go on my phone or anything like that for hours before bed. It's so much better. And if I pick that device up and start doop, 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 and then and time goes by and then I try to put it away, it's hard to go to sleep.
Yeah, it's because of the light, the blue light coming from those screens. You can get what's called a daylight computer,
Oh,
and it doesn't have that intense one spectrum of blue light that causes us to be addicted. It has the red in it too. And it was designed for parents for it was designed for sensitive kids or autistic individuals because that's blue light is damaging to them. And it's I got one that I read with.
so I think that I'm reading some of the comments. I think there's so much stuff we didn't talk about, like about the animal communicator that was on the telepathy tapes. There was so many other things. So maybe we'll do this again. Maybe we'll just do like a special edition of First Fridays that's like extra. And maybe we'll come back. And if anybody has things that they would love to talk about or questions or anything, just send them to me. Hopefully, you guys are all in the Facebook group. If you're not in the private Facebook group, please message me. I will be putting the recording of this in the private Facebook group, and I'd love to keep the conversation going. And if you'd be willing, Shay, like maybe we'll do it again.
I would love to. We could start a telepathy fan club,
Yeah,
telepathy tape fan club, and
I love it. I love it. Does anybody have anything to add before we wrap it up? I think this is the longest one we've ever done, but it feels like no time has gone by.
I can't believe it's been how long?
2 hours.
Wow.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone that shared. Bridget, Kathy, Terry, Elaine. Thanks, everyone. And stay tuned. Have a great weekend. Bye.